What is shakin', Internet? This is Salts bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies Protection Warrior Guide. This guide is targeted at newer tanks that are just trying to learn how to be warriors, and will cover the talents, abilities, and general playstyle of warrior tanks. If you're looking for the very basics of tanking in general, click on the annotation in the video now to get a brief overview of all things tanking. If you're looking for how to tank a specific dungeon or raid content, click on the annotation in the video here to access my specific guides. If you're looking for changes between Warlord tanking and Legion tanking, click the annotation in the video here to jump to the end of the video where I'll cover the major changes between the two expansions. If you're looking for world peace or how to win the lottery, click on the annotation in the video here to end world hunger. Wait, I'm not sure that annotation is working properly. Come back later and see if I can get it fixed. So, the warrior is your bread and butter classic tank. They're big burly guys or gals that wear the heavy armor and carry big shields. Unless you're a gnome warrior like me, in which case you have pink hair and make all those Draenei mages question their manhood. Warrior tanks specialize in blocking attacks with their shields and leaping around the battlefield to incapacitate their foes and rescue their friends. When you think of a tank, your first thought is normally for a warrior. Now, before you go out bashing names and taking skulls, you need to prepare yourself by setting up your talents. You'll get a new talent every 15 levels up to level 90, and a final talent to use at level 100. I will cover each tier by itself and give recommendations for the best tanking option, if one exists. At level 15, you'll unlock Tier 1, which includes Shockwave, which is a cone stun in front of you, Stormbolt, which is a single target range stun, and Warbringer, which makes your Intercept stun nearby targets upon arrival. While all three of these abilities have their ups and downs, I think Shockwave gets my biggest endorsement. Its cooldown is slightly longer than Stormbolt, or Storm Blast, but gets reduced if you hit at least 3 enemies with it by half by 20 seconds. And the stun duration is pretty much the same either way. Warbringer is pretty cool because it just adds a passive stun onto Intercept, a move that you'll be using quite often, but Shockwave just has a lot of general uses in all types of play, so I'd say it gets my vote. Now at level 30, Tier 2 talents will open up. These include Impending Victory, which replaces Victory Rush, which heals you for a percentage of health and deals damage. Inspiring Present, which gives all your party members healing for 3% of their damage. And Safeguard, which switches Intercept to transferring 20% of the damage they take to you for the next 6 seconds, if you use it on an ally. So as good as Impending Victory sounds off the bat, the fact that it costs Rage and has to mix into your rotation actually makes it really not the best choice for group content. Although it is absolutely great when leveling or not in a group, since the others require you having allies. Inspiring Presence is actually really good and completely passive, even though it doesn't help you out in any capacity. Safeguard, on the other hand, is a great choice if you're intercepting your friends a lot, which you really should be doing anyway. So either of these talents would work. Just be careful not to kill yourself when safeguarding to your allies by taking too much damage. Tier 3 talents unlock at level 45. Your options here are Renewed Fury, which increases your damage when you use active mitigation, Ultimatum, which causes your main ability Shield Slam to make Focused Rage cost nothing, and Avatar, which adds a new ability to increase damage and remove roots and snares. To be fair, all of these have their own uses and are pretty good in their own right, so any of them are just fine. Personally, I go with Renewed Fury because it's completely passive and can increase your damage constantly throughout a fight, even if you aren't actively tanking. At level 60, you'll get Tier 4 talents, including Warlord's Challenge, which lets you taunt as much as you want during your main DPS cooldown, Bounding Stride, which lets you use Heroic Leap more and gives it a bonus speed boost, and Crackling Thunder, which makes Thunderclap hit a bigger area. Now, generally, warriors don't need much bonus mobility, but I'm a big fan of Bounding Stride because it lets you leap more often, and leaping is a lot of fun. Crackling Thunder is also a great choice just to make Thunderclap easier to grab lots of adds, even though this really shouldn't normally be an issue. I wouldn't recommend Warlord's Challenge except for very, very specific cases where you have to taunt like a million things that aren't grouped up for Thunderclap. This won't be the case most of the time, so pick up one of the other two. Tier 5 talents at level 75 is what you get them, and includes Best Served Cold, which adds more rage to Revenge, Never Surrender, which causes your active mitigation to double in effectiveness at lower health, and Indomitable, which gives you bonus health and better damage reduction through active mitigation. Now, in general, you should avoid Best Served Cold, because it really doesn't add that much to tankiness. The other two are give and take. Never Surrender is really good if you're going to be at low health a lot, low being less than like 75%, while Indomitable is better if you're higher health, since it makes your Ignore Pain shield even bigger. Personally, I like Indomitable, but both are totally viable choices. Honestly, Never Surrender probably would be slightly better in the long run. Now, at level 60, you get Tier 6 talents. These include Vengeance, which lets your Ignore Pain, Active Mitigation, and Focus Rage reduce each other's costs. Into the Fray, which gives you haste for each nearby enemy. And Booming Voice, which gives your demoralizing shout which lets your demoralizing shout generate rage and increase your damage temporarily. Now, because I love passive talents, and because haste is actually a really good stat for protection warriors, I recommend taking Into the Fray, although Vengeance overall probably adds more survivability. Still though, Into the Fray is okay with one enemy, and great with lots of enemies, so it's kind of my go-to talent. Booming Voice really isn't terrible, but it doesn't add as much tankiness as far as the other ones go, and you really shouldn't take it in almost any scenarios. The final tier is unlocked at level 100, and is home to such amazing talents as Anger Management, causing your big defensive cooldowns to lower in cooldown every time you spend Rage, Heavy Repercussions, which lets you shield block last longer when using your Shield Slam, and Ravager, which lets you throw out a damage zone and increase your parry for a short time. Personally, I think this comes down to either heavy Repercussions or Anger Management. Anger Management is great to get more of those big cooldowns off in a fight, although my money's really on Heavy Repercussions to get all the blocks. All the blocks. Infinity blocks. Ravager really isn't that bad, but it's just not as good as the others. So that covers our talents, and let's go ahead and recap. My recommendations are Shockwave, Inspiring Presence, Renewed Fury, Bounding Stride or Crackling Thunder, Indomitable or Never Surrender, Into the Fray, and Heavy Repercussions. Now that you're all set up with talents, let's discuss the playstyle for just a moment before diving into moves. Prot Warriors are rage-based tanks, meaning you'll be using moves and hitting bad guys to earn rage, and then using different moves to spend that rage and also hit bad guys. Needless to say, there will be lots of hitting bad guys involved. In general, your rage-earning moves will be your basic moves, while your rage-spending moves will be your more defensive active mitigation moves. Warriors rely on blocking with their shield a lot, and building up a damage-absorbing shield. They don't have a lot of spammable AoE moves, but they are great at tanking lots of adds at once thanks to blocking and parrying, and have some great mobility through charges and leaps. Now, as far as abilities go, let's start with your basic moves. The moves you'll be using most often are Shield Slam, Revenge, Devastate, Thunderclap, and Intercept. Now, Shield Slam is your big-hitting, rage-inducing ability. Revenge is your slightly less big-hitting, but also rage-inducing ability that hits multiple targets. Both of these moves are your primary attacks, since both will reset constantly. You want to use them as much as possible so that when a reset happens, you'll actually be gaining something. Devastate is your filler move. It does a small amount of damage and a little bit of damage over time, but most importantly, it will reset your Shield Slam randomly. You'll be pressing this whenever you have nothing else to press. Thunderclap is your AoE move. In general, you'll want to use this when adds spawn, or when you're already tanking lots of things. If you've only got a single target, Devastate really should take priority to get resets on Shield Slam instead. Intercept is a move you'll be using for 4 different reasons. It's a charge attack that gives you rage, so you can use it at the start of a fight to immediately jump on the boss. However, you have to be 8 yards away from an enemy to use it, so once you're tanking, you really can't use it on the big bad guy. However, you can use it on allies, and depending on the talents you selected, it could be used for a whole bunch of different purposes. To be fair, the talents I suggested don't really modify this move much at all, but you still should be using it whenever available on allies to get that rage bump. Now, the real problem I have with Intercept is that you have to target an ally to actually use it, if you're not using it on enemy. The only way around this is with macros. I use macros pretty sparingly because I feel if they were mandatory, it's bad class design, but I digress. If you want to make your life easier, check out on the internet to find a macro for Intercept so that you can just mouse over somebody's HP bar and use it nice and easy. But be warned, the internet is a scary and dangerous place. So, these 4 or 5 attacks will be your core rotation. Basically use Shield Slam or Revenge as often as possible. Intercept to dash around or just build up rage. And Devastate when you've got nothing else to do. If there's multiple enemies, use Thunderclap on cooldown. Now, in addition to these main moves, warriors have quite a plethora of other abilities available. First, let's talk about some active mitigation. Prot warriors have two moves available for this: Shield Block and Ignore Pain. Shield Block gives you a few seconds of guaranteed blocking with your shield, meaning you'll be taking guaranteed reduced damage from physical attacks that can be blocked, which are most physical attacks. It works on a charge system. Using the move gives you 6 seconds of blocking, and you can have two charges built up at any time. A new charge comes back every 13 seconds, so you can pop both charges to get 12 seconds instantly, then have another charge up right after the rest fall off. Now, it does cost a little bit of rage, though, so be aware. Ignore Pain is your more general defense move. It places a shield on you that absorbs 90% of incoming damage up to a certain amount. This just means that it will block a lot of damage for a short amount of time. The cool thing about this is that it doesn't matter what type of damage this is. Magical, physical, emotional, they're all reduced. Okay, maybe you're still going to have those emotional scars afterwards, but it's still a great move. The really nice thing about this is that you can actually build it up while not tanking. If there's a time when you aren't tanking a boss but still building up rage, you can use your rage to get a big Ignore Pain shield and up and running, so that when you actually start tanking, you won't be taking much damage at all. Now, the truth is that Shield Block is much better for taking those physical hits, since you can theoretically have this up almost 100% of the time with enough stats and the right talents. But because Ignore Pain is blocking damage of all kinds, it's kind of my go-to move. You really should be using both, but only use Shield Block when actively tanking. Now, after discussing your active mitigation, let's go ahead and talk big defensive cooldowns. Warriors have two big cooldowns and two minor-ish cooldowns. First, the big uns. Shield Wall is a straight half damage reduction for a set amount of time. This will be the ability you use when bosses use their big super move. You'll have to use it before the boss hits you because it won't really be useful afterwards. Last Stand is a little more lenient. It increases your max health by a significant amount, allowing you to take more damage and get healed up. This can be used both before and after taking a hit, since it adds health back to you when you use it. Now, the smaller cooldowns are a bit more vague. Demoralizing Shout is your first, which reduces all damage all enemies do by a small percentage for a short period. This is great if you're taking a bunch of hits from little guys, and really should be used early and often during any fight. Now, the other little-ish move we have is Spell Reflection. I say little-ish because it can be absolutely amazing, or really meh, depending on the fight. And most fights, it's going to be meh. The idea here is that you'll reflect the next spell back at the boss. Most bosses have abilities that can't be reflected, though, and only rarely does this actually work on any boss moves. Still, even if nothing is reflected, you actually take slightly less magic damage while Spell Reflect is up, which is a few seconds, so it can still be called a minor defensive cooldown. Now, outside of defensive moves, warriors have a range of other moves. First is Taunt, which is the most basic and boringest name for a taunt move ever. It will be your primary taunt move, as if that somehow wasn't obvious. Additionally, you have Heroic Throw, which is one of the warrior's few ranged attacks. It doesn't do much damage, but does gain a lot of threat, making it similar to like a ranged taunt, but less reliable. Still, it's a great move for picking up adds that spawn far away. Now, next up is Heroic Leap, one of my most favoritist moves for warriors. You get to literally leap to a location, skipping holes or other random obstacles in the way. This is just a super fun move, and best of all, it resets your taunt, so you can taunt again after jumping across the whole room. Now, Battle Cry is your offensive move, which gives you a guaranteed critical strikes for a short period. You really should use this on cooldown during fights unless there's a specific time where the boss is extra vulnerable. Berserker's Rage is an ability that will clear all CC like stuns and roots for a few seconds. This rarely is useful in any raids, but keep it in mind. Now, finally, I'm going to talk about the last basic move that I intentionally skipped before, Focused Rage. This move is a rage dump that does damage and increase the amount of your damage your next shield slam does, and it actually can stack up. Now, the reason it's not part of your main core abilities is that you really shouldn't be using it much at all. If you're actively tanking, you should be using all of your rage on Shield Block and Ignore Pain. If you're not actively tanking, you should be using all of your rage on Ignore Pain to build up a nice big shield. The only reason you'd be using Focused Rage is if you're not tanking for so long that you've maxed your Ignore Pain shield, and this really shouldn't be happening very often anyway. Now, because of this, I'm going to gloss over this move and say that you have it for those rare occasions when you just have too much rage and absolutely nothing to spend it on. So, now that we've covered all the moves, let's go ahead and recap. You should primarily be using Shield Slam and Revenge, especially when they glow. Thunderclap if there's lots of guys, and Devastate if there's nothing else to do. Intercept should be used on nearby allies to gain rage unless you're going to need it to run to a new ad soon or something like that. As I briefly covered before, you'll want to use Shield Block when actively tanking, especially if there are multiple ads or lots of physical attacks. Ignore Pain should be used regularly at all times, especially when not tanking, to build up a nice absorption shield. Use Shield Wall to take really big hits, and use Last Stand if you don't have Shield Wall, or you start dropping in health. Constantly use Demoralizing Roar and Battle Cry to decrease damage you're taking and increase damage you're dealing. And pop Spell Reflect whenever you're taking any magic damage at all, or if you could deflect something specific. Now, putting all of these in place, you should be ready to go out and defend your honor, or at least your group mates. Finally, you're going to want to get the right gear for the job. Warriors wear plate armor with strength and stamina, but specifically, you'll be looking for secondary stats in most cases. There are 4 that really stand out, and as a protection warrior, you'll want to prioritize them in this order. Haste is first, as it lowers the cooldown on nearly every ability we have. More Shield Slams and Revenges mean more Rage, and you'll get more charges of Shield Block to boot. Overall, this will boost your survivability and damage better than any other stat. Mastery is next, as it will increase your block and critical block chance. Don't worry, you really don't need to know what critical block is, so don't worry about it. This will increase your tankiness to physical attacks by a lot, so it's really worth building up even if it doesn't make your magical resistance go up much. Versatility will make your damage go up and damage taken go down, so it's good all-around stat that you'll want as well. And Critical Strike is the last one, which will increase your parry chance on top of possibly your DPS and healing done. It's a less effective tank stat than all of the others, though. All in all, you'll want as much haste as possible, followed by Mastery, then Versatility, and finally Crit Strike. Any other stats aren't as useful as these, so just focus on these. Now, if you're looking for more advice on how to tank a specific dungeon, click on the annotation here to be taken to my dungeon and raid guides for Legion. Otherwise, stick around as we discuss the differences between Warlords tanking and Legion tanking. So, first and foremost, let's talk about our active mitigation. Shield Barrier is gone, and now instead of that little shield, we get Ignore Pain. I, for one, welcome this change because it's super cool that we have an active mitigation that we can use while not tanking to build up a shield. Because of this, we don't need Heroic Strike as much for a Rage Dump. But it's gone! Instead, we get Focused Rage, which increases the damage of our next Shield Slam. You won't need this as much even when not tanking because you'll be using Ignore Pain instead. But it basically replaces Heroic Strike. Intercept has replaced Charge and Intervene, and I'm pretty happy with that. It gets 2 charges that refresh pretty quickly, so now you can freely dash around to enemies and allies with one simple move. A lot of our cooldowns have increased in, well, cooldown. Shield Wall is now on a 4-minute timer, and even Demoralizing Shout is on a 1.5-minute timer. Now, Revenge is now a non-targeted move that just hits everything in front of you. It's a bit less spammable in pack fights because it can only get reset every 3 seconds now instead of every single hit block. One change that is hard to notice for us noobs is the Rage redesign. Crits used to give Rage, but now don't, and now you get Rage from taking damage. I think this is kind of how it used to be a few expansions ago, but I can't quite remember. Either way, now you'll be getting more consistent Rage just for tanking enemies. Our main offensive cooldown is now Battle Cry, which just gives guaranteed crits for a few seconds. And that pretty much covers all the high-level changes for Prot Warriors. I personally love the changes to active mitigation for Warriors, since it really gives you something to do at all times, and some good food for thought, even while not tanking. I really like how Warriors are panning out at the beginning of Legion, but only time will tell how they fare. I think the focus away from damage tanks like Gladiator Stance and Crit giving Rage is more fun, and makes me feel like I'm focusing on tanking rather than trying to be more useful in multiple roles at once. I think the changes to the talent tree were good as well, as there are many viable options depending on the fight. And overall, I'm kind of excited to dust off my shield and hit those dungeons. Hopefully you have liked this guide for dummies. Please like, favorite, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and, as always, you keep it salty, Internet.